Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Lincoln Journal Star's Life in the Red podcast. Luke Mullin and Amie Just, your hosts, back for another season of the pod. Nebraska football's back. So are we.
Ready or not, here we go.
Yeah. Summer break was much needed, short-lived. Yep.
Too short.
I'm replaying the memories in my head, of being on vacation.
Yeah. Thankfully, I will have one more getaway for me personally. I can't speak for you, but I will have one more getaway before the season starts because I bought concert tickets a very long time ago without really realizing when they were for. So the week before football season, I'll be gone. But, oh well.
Better to ask for forgiveness than permission.
Yeah, well, I rationalize it now. We're not going to find out a ton that weekend right before the game. Like, either the starting quarterback will have been named already or won't be named until the week of. Like, I don't think anything, famous last words, right? I don't think anything's going to happen. And something will probably happen, but oh well, I'll live and I'll figure it out.
Yep. Rarely a quiet week around Nebraska athletics and Nebraska football, but we have plenty to talk about this season. We'll have a lot more to come, new format to follow. We'll have depth chart previews later this month. But today just kind of wanted to give an overview of what we've seen so far from the team in fall camp.
Training
and
camp.
I was going to say, I knew there was going to be resistance.
Hey, Matt Rule says training camp. So
NFL people.
Well, okay. Fall, maybe it kind of felt like fall yesterday. We're recording on a Wednesday. But no. But also, like, I understand the argument the other side. Well, you can't call it summer camp. Like, no, duh. But, like, I don't know. Training camp, because you're training for the season. It's not fall. I know you're training for the fall. It's the fall semester. Yeah. But actually, it's not the fall semester right now. School hasn't started yet. So
the season is played in the fall. The camp takes place ahead of the season. Fall camp?
No.
All right. Well, agree to disagree. I'm going to continue. I'm going to continue calling it fall camp.
Well, you do what you want, but I will call it training camp because it's training camp.
Yep. This is the division on the podcast. But some big picture things to talk about just briefly here about the season for Nebraska. Some changes that'll be coming. Additional on-field coaches they're helping so far during practices. Many of them already had been around the program, analysts and such, but not able to help in that on-field role. NCAA rule change changed that. And several of these guys, their position groups have spoken about, how useful it's been just recently. And we'd heard about it in the spring, too, when Nebraska was moving some guys around. But Jack Potenza worked with the Jack linebackers. MJ Sherman talked a little bit about that, about how he's always in his ear about coaching him up at that position. So good to see those different coaches getting involved, getting part of the action.
Yeah, I was talking with Mitch Sherman actually about this yesterday. It's just like one guy for, depending on the size of the position group, like, okay, you've got one coach for 10, 12 people. Like, how do you get better if you have very minimal one-on-one time? Like, so yeah, you get things corrected maybe later, but the more people that are around, the more eyeballs that are there working with that specific position group, you can make fixes quicker. You don't have to wait for film review to be like, oh yeah, you should probably do that better. Instead, you can get more instant feedback. Obviously, things are going to fall through the cracks a little bit, right? Because it's not a 1-to-1 ratio. But I just think this is good from that perspective. Obviously, not every program will be able to afford a massive staff. So you'll see more division, I think, between I want to call it the Power 2 conferences and maybe some other schools. But I like the idea behind the rule, but the execution moving forward obviously could create more of a have and have not situation.
Yeah. And I mean, especially for a head coach like Matt Rule said, all about the players, their development. I mean, it just makes sense, right? To pour those resources into them. these additional coaches at all those different positions. So that is taking place. And also during the games, another rule change that was passed, electronic communication in the helmets. Coaches can talk to the players, and there are some different, rules to it. It cuts off, 10, 15 seconds left on the play clock. We heard some brief, discussions of it, especially on the offensive side of the ball, how they were going to implement that. And, from what it sounds like, Nebraska, they've been practicing that pretty heavily, at least for a year, in bits and pieces, planning out how that was going to go both in the spring and before. And Marcus Satterfield, Glenn Thomas, they seem all on board with it. They had no concerns about this implementation.
Well, yeah, because they've done it before, right? Because they both have NFL experience, right? So they're used to it. Like, it was weird for them not to have that last season for Marcus, obviously, Glenn, new addition. But yeah, I think that because they have experience with it, Matt Rule has experience with it, that will help. It's not everybody, players and coaches, learning something new. They've had experience with it. And Heinrich, they worked with it a little bit, not this most recent spring, but the spring before. And so you got Danny and Dylan some work with that this past spring. Obviously, it's still new to them, but the more people who have experience with something, the better. And so not everybody is learning on the fly, which I think is a good thing.
Yeah. And I mean, especially whether, it's young quarterback, inexperienced quarterback, you can imagine that'd be very helpful, for a coach just to have a, quick teaching moment. But game moves fast. So that's, a little easier said than done when you got to get those calls in.
Yeah, for sure.
Very quickly.
I wonder if they're going to embrace the true NFL model, because so many quarterbacks wear wristbands. And every play call is like denoted by a number. I wonder if you'll start to see that moving forward, or if that's too complicated right now and you ease into something like that. That wouldn't surprise me either, to kind of simplify things.
Yeah, certainly. So we'll see how that shakes out. And then, on the defense, it's usually the middle linebackers. MJ Sherman said, John Bullock, Mekhi Bear, Javen Wright, those are the guys who've been experimenting with that. They've been working with that on the defensive side of the ball. And final thing to note, for the home games, Nebraska will be on the west sideline.
Finally.
Yep. They'll be in the shade.
I remember when I asked Matt Rule about that over a year ago. And I don't remember exactly when it was, but people came after me. They're like, no, I'm not changing. Well, guess what? I was right.
Well, they've been on the East for a long time.
I know, but
yeah,
why were we still doing that? I remember when I asked about it. I asked about it after the news had broken about Connor Stallions and the early days of news coming out about the sign stealing scandal from Michigan. That's when I asked about it. So just about a year ago.
Yeah.
And people are like, oh, look at her, dumb. We're not changing. Guess what? Yes, they are. They're changing. And look, I understand why they didn't. There's less room on that side. With as big as Nebraska's roster is, like, it makes sense to be on the sideline that has more space. But moving forward with a smaller roster, not yet, but a smaller roster, it makes sense for them to be over there. It does.
Well, I think, Matt Rule, obviously he cares about the traditions in Nebraska, but anything that's like a competitive advantage, I think for him is like, it's a no-brainer. There was not, an issue with, we got to stay on the east side. I think he's like, hey, like, there's games, the sun was bearing down on him over on that east sideline, the west sideline in the shade. As you mentioned, the view from the press box to get those signals, there were a couple of reasons. So just of note for fans to expect. They'll be on the west.
And the tunnel walk, because they moved tunnels, it will look less weird now. Yeah. Last year, it looked weird.
They did a big loop, around midfield.
It will look so much better with them switching sidelines, since they already had changed tunnels for the tunnel walk. It'll look better, I promise.
Yeah, so a couple things to note there. So those changes coming into place, but fall camp, fall practice, it's been going so far. We're about a week and a half in for Nebraska. And just as we break down, some of what we've seen so far, let's just give our general thoughts. I mean, year 2 under Matt Rule, what's the vibe? What are the expectations for this Nebraska football team?
Yeah, I think the vibe has been pretty good. Not to get ahead of where we want to go in this conversation. But I loved the vibe outside of the injuries that happened at that 1890 practice. I thought that the music was all over the place. But yeah, I got a lot of whiplash from their music choices. I need to talk to whoever is on the aux. What are you doing? Anyway, I digress. The vibe was good. Everybody was excited. Granted, you're not in the doldrums of camp yet, right? You know, you're still early enough in it where you're not worried about the finish line. Like, you're still enjoying the process. Now, in 2 weeks, might be a little different. The lulls might happen, so to speak. But I like the vibe. I like the energy. Everybody seems to be really excited. Nothing is new for the returners, right? They've been through this before. They know what to expect under Matt Rule. Some of them have different position coaches, right? So there's a little bit of different tweaks there. But things seem to be good. From a one-person standpoint, I think Dylan Raiola, everybody. Not Raiola. Rye bread. Let's get his name right, please. Nothing bothered me last year more than Chuba Purdy on the
oh, that was
oh
hard.
my God.
Yep,
it was
tough.
terrible.
Yeah.
So let's avoid that. Moving forward to the announcers who are doing their homework. Please, for the love of God, it's Raiola. Anyway, I think he's looked great. I think he has, rightfully earned a lot of the hype that he's gotten. Obviously, they haven't named a starter yet, but I think it's going to be him. I don't think it's bold to say that.
Yep. You get a guy like that to start him, to play him, and develop him. And yeah, I mean, to your point, year 2, we've heard a lot from these coaches about, the standard and then raising the standard. They like to say yesterday's price is, not today's price. And in that aspect of, hey, you did this well last year, we'll do it better this year. Or you're horrible in this area. Turnovers. Yep. How about you fix it up this year? So, there's been a lot to focus on in that area, but I think I do agree with you. It seems like everybody's on that same page. They're very bought in, falling behind the leaders of this football team. And there are quite a few leaders, very vocal leaders. So far we've heard a lot about that, how focused they are. And we got a good look at them on Saturday, as you said. And so did about 3,500 other folks, people who were there supporting Nebraska's NIL efforts. This was a fundraiser for 1890, the official NIL collective of Nebraska football, and spoke to their CEO. We heard from Matt Rule a little bit about the event, about how they were hoping, it was going to be a unique opportunity to raise some funds and show some people the Nebraska football team. And both of us were there. And, honestly, I was impressed too. Talked to a few fans, people who just saw it as a great opportunity, to get a look at the team and, maybe feel like their donation, they're actually getting something back rather than making a, free, NIL donation, which is, is difficult, as a lot of folks want to support that football program. But from everything around it, they were speaking to the crowd. There were a lot of families there too. It seemed like a pretty neat event just for people to come by and see.
Yeah, and they build it as practice. And I wonder, and I was actually talking with some of the Husker Athletic Fund people about this. If this were to have been in conjunction with a scrimmage, I think 10,000 people would have showed up. Like 3,500 people for practice, I think is pretty good. Just not knowing what to expect, this being a new thing that had never been done before. But yeah, if they had worked this into a scrimmage or maybe with, they're announcing single-digit jerseys today at the end of practice, I think more people would have showed up. But again, this was a dry run, something that had never been done before. And yeah, I think that it will continue. I think they liked the response that they got. And hopefully moving forward, now that people know what to expect, more people will show up.
Yeah, wow, I like the jersey idea.
I can't take credit for that.
Just flash number 1 on the scoreboard and just Dylan Raiola starts running out of the tunnel.
I can't take credit for that. One of our readers actually tweeted that at me.
Wow. Okay.
And I can't remember their name off the top of my head, but it was their idea. I cannot take credit for it, but I thought it was pretty genius.
Yeah, some intelligent folks out there, more intelligent than me, because I would not have thought of that. But that'd be a fun idea. A lot of other twists that they could bring to it, because Matt Rule did say, "Hey, we want this event to grow, to keep coming back." So we'll see what they do with that. But also from an on-field standpoint, we're watching the team. Of course, it was a really good opportunity, to get a look at how they practice, in long periods of time. I don't think anything they did really surprised us. It's the bits and pieces that we've seen from practice before. Really conventional stuff. They weren't practicing any trick plays or anything.
No, definitely not.
I could promise you that. But the offense, we're really focusing on that. Dylan Raiola, of course.
What'd you say?
Dylan Raiola, carry on. We'll continue fighting this fight. Or you will, maybe, if I can't get it down.
I want, as somebody who has a weirdly spelled first name, I just want people to have their names said correctly. Like Nash Hutmaker. It's Hutmaker. Maker of huts is how his mother has described it to people. I don't know. But there are some pretty difficult names on the roster. I will say there's one that we will be talking about later that I know that I'm going to mess up because his own coach calls him something different. So, but yes, I don't know. I just want people's names to be spelled right because it's their name. That's who you are. Said wrong. Like, I don't know. It just bothers me.
Yeah, it's sad. Yep.
It just bothers me. Yeah. Anyway, sorry for interrupting you.
Well, I was talking about the offense. We're talking about names here. We'll figure it out. But, we're watching the offense, of course, and the wide receiver position. I mean, Jamal Banks, very impressive.
Mm-hmm.
We know that, right? But me and you, we were both watching Carter Nelson, thinking about how he looks
good.
physically.
Like, he looks like he belongs out there. He doesn't look like he's undersized or he needs to gain 40 pounds, right? Because he came in as a tight end prospect and they moved him over to wide receiver, which I think is a very good move early on. But yeah, he looks good. By all accounts, he does not look like a sore thumb out there. He does not look like an undersized 8-man guy. He looks like he belongs.
Yep. Looks big, physical, big time wide receiver. That's what you see out there. He's moving really well. And then so was Ja'Cory Barney. And anybody who saw the spring game, that's not a surprise. But me and you were thinking, he ran a few little touch pass, jet sweep. They can use that guy in the offense.
Yeah. And they could definitely use him on special teams. I know you don't want to throw a freshman back there. They make freshman mistakes, but oh my God. They cannot get well, they could, I guess. With him, you would get better, I think, in punt return because the punt return game last year was non-existent.
Yep. So they need to figure out a way, and we saw a little bit of special teams work there during that practice, but not a whole ton yet. We'll see more, I'm sure, as this practice period.
Because some of that was obviously cut short by an injury to Roger Gradney.
Yep. Tough deal, especially there in front of the fans. But that was the Saturday practice that we got to look at, and we spoke about it a little bit, but let's just talk about it in full. Dylan Raiola, a lot of attention on him. Obviously, we saw, the Patrick Mahomes comparisons that were flying across social media there as he moved into the select dorms. But from what we've seen from him in practice, what we've heard from his teammates, all focused, totally business. Matt Rule has complimented, how early he was there working in the mornings, over the summer and now in the fall too. And the bits and pieces from practice, he's got a great arm. He leads the offense well. He looks every bit like a phenomenal quarterback out there.
And it's not that he just leads the offense well. I think he's leading the team well, which is a lot to put on a 19-year-old kid, right? Yeah. But one of the things that stood out to me the most, we're all kind of getting ready to leave. The defense is running gassers. But who's out there? Dylan. Dylan ran the gasser with the defense, which says a lot to me about who he is as a person and who he is as a leader, because he didn't have to do that. He's not a defensive player. Nobody else on offense that I'm aware of ran that with them. So I don't know. It's the little things, I think, that stand out.
Yeah, definitely. And certainly, this quarterback competition, I think this is something that we both expect to carry through, to up ultimately to that game week, just as a case of, keeping the pressure off, maybe keeping people from, reading in too much to one particular thing or another. But, we watched Heinrich Harburg, we watched Danny Kaelin, Jalen Gramstad, throw and run the different offensive units at these events too. And, they all have their moments too, but I think just the way that Dylan zips it and finds those wide receivers, it was just very impressive to watch.
Yeah, I agree. That back shoulder, like end zone fade sort of situation there in that first team period, we were standing right next to each other and I was like, ooh, all right.
Like, yeah, that was a good throw.
Yeah. And good defense too, by all accounts.
Tight coverage, yeah.
Yeah, so, but I will say, with Dylan more than likely being the starting quarterback, I still think this offense needs to find ways to use Heinrich Harburg. I will stand on the table for that. He's one of the most athletic people they have on this team. Keeping him on the sideline is a detriment, I think.
Yeah, I mean, we saw how good he was as a runner, taking off last year. Very dynamic in that regard. And I think certainly, yeah, he will have a role. They'll find a way to use him.
They need to.
No matter what. Yep. And something else we were following here, over the start of fall practice and a little bit before that was the defensive backs room because offseason coaching change, Evan Cooper resigns, John Butler is hired. And we got the chance. He spoke in front of the media. We got to hear from him. We've heard from his players a little bit, and obviously we saw some of the coaching there on Saturday as well. And from everything, I don't think there was any expectation, right, that 30-year coaching veteran, was going to come in and it was going to be difficult. But at the same time, there's a ton to learn about the scheme, the players, the personnel, everything involved. And so far, he's really latched on. And what I like to hear from him was that he's learned that 3-3-5. He studied it. And now he's really diving in and ready to show what he knows because it's a little bit different, his background, from what Tony White and some of these other defensive coaches on staff have.
Yeah. And granted, a lot of NFL defenses, not all of them, but a lot of them use a nickel. So even if that's not truly their base defense, it is, let's be honest. So he's had experience coaching with 5 DBs on the field. So, but it's just different when that's your base. So, but I mean, he's an NFL vet for a reason. He's coached all-pro guys. He's coached guys who will probably be in the Hall of Fame one day. He's coached Pro Bowl guys. And he's coached guys from all over the country that have played in all different defenses, right? So, I don't know. I just think that if you have to lose a position coach, who better, so late in the process, right? Who better to fill that void than a guy who's been there, done that, and was in the league for the last 10 years, but has also coached college kids before, because it's different. It's very different coaching college kids as opposed to professionals. I think that line is blurring a little bit more now, but they're still college kids. They're still 17 to 24 year old guys, which is a little different. So, but by all accounts, all of them are really reacting well to John coming aboard.
Yep. And certainly he's got quite an interesting group to look at because we were watching that position. Tommy Hill was out for portions of that practice there on Saturday, and Jeremiah Charles, Marquise Buford, those were the cornerbacks that Nebraska had out there for that first team defensive unit. And then I was also watching Sayer Wright, the USC transfer, a little bit, during the one-on-ones, and he looked very impressive to me as well. But be interested to see how that cornerback position plays out.
Yeah, I'm not so sure what's going to happen there. You can use all of them.
And they will, I'm sure. Yeah.
Just I'm not more so interested, who's the starter going to be? What's the rotation going to like? Who's going to be in on first down as opposed to third down? What the situation, that's what I'm more interested in is the rotation and how you keep those guys' legs fresh in the games.
Yep. Staying fresh, very important. As Nebraska deals with some injuries, This always happens throughout fall camp. People get banged up, miss some time. So let's go through the injury report, how Nebraska's going to deal with some of these injuries as well. First one of note, kicker Tristan Alvano. He's limited, not practicing as the moment as he recovers from a minor groin surgery that he went through over the summer. And I mean, as he recovers, it's worth talking. I mean, what do we expect from the kicker position in 2024, whether it's a healthy Alvano or right now the healthy players on the roster, John Hull and Nico Ottomanelli? I mean, what do we expect from Nebraska kicking game?
Progress from last year. I thought that Tristan didn't miss a PAT last year, so that's obviously good, but he had some doink issues, whether that was not compensating for the wind as much as he probably should, or, I didn't think there were any like breakdowns in communication from snap to hold. What will that look like now that there's a new long snapper? I don't think there's going to be any issues there. I think their long snapper is great by all accounts. So I want to see, will they be able to take that step forward and know that every time, whichever kicker tries out there, if Tristan's not ready to go, I think he will be. But if he's not, you have to go out there thinking that, oh yeah, this is a gimme every time. Doesn't matter if it's 55, 25 yard field goals. It's got to be a gimme every time. And last year, it wasn't that.
I will say, though, what I feel like is you play the freshman kicker knowing that you're going to take some lumps.
Yes.
Right. But to your point, right? I mean, if you have that freshman year and then you don't improve from it, then you have that stagnation. Do you need to bring somebody in? It's certainly, you play him with that upwards growth mentality. So yeah, I think we do need to see that out of Tristan Alvano this season. I mean, he has a big leg. He practices hard. We see it in the pregame all the time at Memorial Stadium, him nailing these long kicks, but it's hard to do it in the game. It's hard to do it in those pressure situations. So yeah, we'll see what they get out of that kicker position as Alvano recovers. And then some notable injuries here on the offensive line. Henry Lutovsky, he's out 2 to 3 weeks with a calf injury. Nebraska does expect him back for the start of the season to be able to practice up to the lead of that. But the big news that came out this week, Teddy Prohaska, one of the top returning offensive linemen, season-ending ACL injury, and horrible news for a guy who's been through a couple of those at Nebraska.
Yeah, it is his other knee from the last knee injury, but he's out for the year. Like, I don't know how much of a silver lining that is just in this moment. Like, for his long-term health, I think that's good, but, as a person, right? But as we sit here right now, he's out for the season. And it just, what sucks is we talked to him last week and he was so excited to be back and so excited to be healthy. And it just goes to show that things can change very, very quickly. I wish him the best. I feel bad.
Yeah.
Because it just feels like a broken record. Like, he is so good when he is healthy. But the key words there are when he is healthy. And it's just unfortunate that he just can't catch a break in that department.
Yeah, I mean, it's the cruel side of sports. I mean, you just want to see somebody have the opportunity, to compete, and that's been taken away from him, unfortunately. Roger Gradney also, as you mentioned, we saw him go down there on Saturday during that practice. Also, an ACL injury for him will end his season, and he can redshirt. So that is the opportunity for him moving forward. But this is big news for the offensive line because Turner Corcoran, he came back. He's been practicing at that left tackle position.
He's a little banged up right now, though, which worries me a little bit.
Exactly, right? I mean, you need like 6. You need more than that realistically. But if you have a good 6th lineman who can slide in, and I think Nebraska was maybe thinking that, Corcoran, Prohaska, maybe that would be the case. I mean, this is going to be a lot for them to deal with. And as we saw here on Saturday, let's talk about this, how they lined up first and second unit there during practice on Saturday. It was Corcoran at left tackle, Justin Evans at left guard, Ben Scott, Micah Mazuka, and Bryce Benhart on that first unit. And then the second team, Prohaska, he was there at left tackle. Jason Machachak, how'd I do?
That's the one that I alluded to earlier so listeners, if you've listened to Matt Rule talk, he calls him Mashake Shack, and that's just like seared into my head, and I know that's not right.
Incredible nickname, though.
Oh, phenomenal nickname, but I just know that that's not how you say his name, but every time I go to say his name, that's what pops in my brain. So I think, I think you did good.
I think we're figuring out here, folks.
Yes.
But that second team O-line, Prohaska, Machachak, Sam Sledge was there at center, Tyler Canuck at right guard, and Gunnar Gatula there at right tackle. So a lot of youth on that second team unit. Some guys who will be in that picture because Canuck, he was working at tackle. He's been at guard, so he might be able to play that spot too. But Gunnar Gatula was another guy that Matt Rowe mentioned could be in that picture there at tackle.
Yeah, I mean, that would be cool for the Southeast kid.
Lincoln native, yep.
Yeah, his dad, I saw his parents at practice. They were excited. They go to practice quite a bit, but when it's in the stadium, it's pretty cool. But yeah, no, it'd be pretty cool for Gunnar if he got that opportunity. And this staff has shown that it trusts young guys if they're good enough.
Yeah, and I mean, the other thing to note here in this discussion is the guard position too, because, Corcoran, he had experience at guard. Some people were thinking, well, maybe you could play Prohaska at tackle, Corcoran at guard. Well, this changes things, and Lutovsky being out as well. So Evans and Mazuka on that first team unit. Matt Rule had spoken, a long time ago about Micah Mazuka, like, hey, he needs to come along. Recently, he's been complimentary, saying, hey, he's done everything right. He's preparing well. And from what you see from him, and he's a big, imposing guard, and he seemed to be moving pretty well there on Saturday.
Yeah, and with Justin Evans, that's not a surprise at all that he's working there. Raiola has, Donnie Raiola, sorry. I'm going to have to clarify moving forward, y'all. Has spoken really highly of him. A quick note there on his name. He has dropped the Jenkins. He is Justin Evans now. Same person. Just wanted to clarify that too. But yeah, been super complimentary of the work that he's put in, not just recently, but in the spring too. So not a surprise that he's working at left guard.
Yep. So that's how the first and second O-line units look there on Saturday. Again, maybe changes to come in these coming weeks. And as we wrap up this episode, we got more to look forward to in these coming weeks. Again, we'll break down offense, defense, season preview. We'll give our depth chart predictions, season predictions, but want to have some quick fire questions about this Nebraska football season. We'll go through them quick, give some thoughts very shortly. Yes and no, how things are going to shake out. Amy, will Nebraska make a bowl game?
Yes.
I think so too. Schedule is nice.
I think that's the floor.
Yeah.
Like if they don't make a bowl game, like what the heck happened there?
Nice save.
Yeah, nice save. But yeah, listeners know what I wanted to say. But yeah, what the heck happened there if they don't make a bowl game? Like if they don't make a bowl game, like it's a disappointment because this team is way better than that. And the schedule sets up for that too.
Yeah. Defense is great. Offense should be better. Schedule is fair enough.
Yep.
So bowl game, we anticipate it. Quarterback position, will Dylan Raiola be Nebraska's starting quarterback against UTEP?
Yes.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, the way that it's shaken out, he looks like the best QB in camp, and there's several weeks left. You never know, but from what we've seen, from what we've heard, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Next one, who will lead Nebraska in sacks this season?
MJ Sherman.
Oh, okay. I'm going to go with the repeat, Jamari. He did it last year. He's going to do it again.
I think that teams are going to game plan for him better, and it's going to leave somebody unblocked. Yeah. And I think more oftentimes it's going to be Sherman.
I think there'll be a lot of sacks to go around.
Yes.
Now, who gets them? We'll see.
Lots
That'll
of
be the
splits,
difficult. Yeah.
maybe.
Yeah.
But if we're talking true D-line guys, my vote's Nash.
Mm-hmm. He'd be one to watch as well. And last one, does Nebraska fix its turnover problems?
I hope so. Not that I'm a Nebraska fan, but last year was just painful.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to watch a team give away games like that. And I think as long as they're not minus 17, it's an improvement. I mean, realistically, they should try to be closer to 0, ideally.
Yeah. I think the defense will help mitigate some potential problems there. What I want to see is the fumbles be fixed and the stupid interceptions be fixed. If it's, a 4th and whatever, and you're going for broke, and you turn it over, whatever. But if it's a handoff miscue or, a red zone fumble or an interception in the end zone, like those have to stop. Because I don't know, I like watching good football, and all of that, not good football.
Yep. Eliminate the preventable.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure improvements will follow. That's something Nebraska's been talking about a lot. So remains to be seen whether they can put that into action. We'll get a look at practice.
You didn't answer the question. Do you think so?
Yeah.
Okay.
As long as they're not minus 17.
Yeah, fair.
Again, I mean, like I said, I think just closer to 0. That should. I mean, I'm sure they'd want to be positive, but you never know. It's tough in the turnover margin department. But we'll get more out of this Nebraska team during fall camp. We'll get a look at practice here coming up soon. Lots more coverage to have and discuss for you at journalstar.com. Lots more to follow from the Life in the Red podcast, but that will do it for today's episode. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again next week.